Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Lead About Podcast. I have a back-to-back one of my new dearest friends from the UK, Mr. Trevor Gordon from London. We had two beautiful conversations. The first one about his upbringing, second one about his impact. And today we're going to talk about something that is very dear to him, and that is, well, it's not as dear to him, but it's a very important topic to him because he's lived since he moved to the UK as a young boy to now as a recognized leader and a sought after speaker in his field, and that is the evolution of racism in the UK. So before we start, welcome back to the show, my friend. Always a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Payman. Bless you and thank you. I actually look forward to coming on your show. Thank you. That's all I can say.
Pleasure's all mine. And for those of that do not know you and haven't watched the first two episodes, give us a brief overview, a brief summary of who's Trevor as a man, as a human being, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as I said previously. Trevor is a man who's very proud of his blackness. It defines a certain part of my character, but it doesn't define all of me because there's a man here. And I wish that I hadn't always been seen through the lens of color. But then when, we're going to go on to talk about it, but then when you grow up in a system that isn't your host system, where the indigenous people are a different color, then you grow up being seen through that lens. I've tried not to perpetuate the stereotypes. I've tried to be me. I've tried to be a good man, the man that I know I am. Navigated the system, done reasonably well, but I hate being stereotyped. I'm not a black man. I'm a man that happens to be black, in the way that I didn't like being called a black lawyer, because, I don't see people going around saying, oh, look, he's a white lawyer, So, these labels that people attach to the microaggressions, I've never heard anybody called a female nurse, but if you're a male nurse, they call you a male nurse, and they think that they're, they don't realize unconscious bias, that it's actually a microaggression. So that's who I am. I'm a man, and, blackness is a part of my story. It's a part of my narrative. But there's a lot to me, it's not just about my color.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you. Totally. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So you wanted to talk about the evolution of racism from the moment you arrived in the UK as a young boy to now. So let's start from the start. How old were you when your family moved to the UK?
I was 2.
Okay. So share with us your very first experiences as a young boy, whether it was in kindergarten and primary school, how you were so-called introduced to discrimination and racism.
Yeah, I mean, I did mention it last week, but I'll cover the early part again. My first memories started at about 4.5 or 5, which is quite normal. I don't remember anything at 2 or 3. But I started to remember from 4.5, 5. And I remember my first day at Golders Green Primary School. And 1965, Winston Churchill, the flag was at half-mast because Winston Churchill had died. And I'll never forget it. And I've gone in and they've taken me in. My mum's taken me in and dropped me off. And I remember the smells and I remember, vividly the environment. Only black boy there, but at that age, I was not color cognizant. I didn't get it. I didn't understand racism, and you shouldn't. The human brain is not wired to do sexism and racism and those sorts of things at that age. You become sort of cognitively aware of race and gender from about the ages of 7 or 8. But we live in a society that the minute you're born, gender is forced on you, race is forced on you, class is forced on you, which I think is very unhealthy for young people. So, instantly at the age of 5, I saw that people were now seeing me through the lens of color. It was about my color. That's all it was about. They didn't want to know where I came from, what part of the world I came from. The fact that I came from a colony that had been owned by the United Kingdom for 500 years, where the language was English, where a British flag flew over the island, where we sang God Save the Queen more than they sang it in the UK. That shocked me. You know, that shocked me. We were more patriotic than the British were. But no one was interested in that. They just saw black, you know. So they responded accordingly. They didn't care, did I come from Africa, Nigeria? You were just foreign. And, you know, I went through all the stuff, little boy asking to see my tail, a little girl rubbing my skin and then amazed that the color didn't come off, children touching my hair, all sorts of stuff like that. Monkey chants, nigger, you know, wog. I just regular language from that point on in my life, but not just in school, but outside of school as well. First arrivals, first, you know, influx of black people coming to the country. And it took them a little bit of time to understand. My parents were asked to come here. They didn't try and jump on a boat in Calais. My parents were asked to come here after World War II, yes, to help build this country back up after the Germans had bombed the hell out of it. We were asked, and the English came to the Caribbean and they needed people for the National Health Service. They needed people for the new transport infrastructure, the rail network, the underground, very much the NHS, because that's what my mother went into. So, you know, we were asked to come. We were quite happy back there in the sun. And some of us bought into that, let's go to the motherland, as my mother and father did. And let's see what the motherland has to offer. So that was my early formative experience that set the context for my next, you know, for over 50 years of living, breathing and operating in the United Kingdom, more specifically in London.
Wow. And as a young boy, especially as you mentioned earlier, as a young boy, we're not cognizant of our skin color because for us, we don't notice at first, we're all just the same people. When you noticed that and you saw that this is not a good thing, it's actually can be pretty mean. How did you cope with that? What made you overcome that and not lose your mind and get depressed and do any act of, you know, violence or anything else that can come as a result of such a behavior and treatment from your peers, especially at such a young age?
I made some nice friends. You know, the one thing I've always known, Payman, and you know, is your friends don't come in a color. And I made some nice white friends.
Yes.
And going through the system, I had some really lovely white people who saw me for what I was. And then I had white social workers, because we were poor, who were really nice to me. So it wasn't all, there were, you know, for every, you know, 10 white people that were horrible, there was always one who was like an angel. And that kind of helped me to balance things out and to keep things in perspective. And I was just a normal little boy doing what little boys did. You know, I'd go scrumping, nicking apples, you know, ringing on people's doors and running away, knock down ginger. I did all the things that little boys did. Went tadpoling, you know, got covered in mud. I was just a normal little healthy little English boy, really, growing up. And then, you know, obviously when I went into care, again, very much so, I just saw myself as a normal boy. But what did happen to me at that time, but what I wasn't realizing was that there was a process happening to me. And that was my self-confidence, my self-esteem. And it was being eroded. But at that age, I hadn't cognitively worked out that my self-esteem was being eroded. And so by the time I got to, I'd say about 12 or 13, I began to accept that, you know, I had low self-esteem, you know, because after a while, if the world tells you that black is bad and black is evil and everything bad is black and, you know, black people steal and black people do all these horrible, you know, you can buy into it. And it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Where I've got friends of mine, and because the system said you're rubbish and you're dirt and you're going to be a thief and you're going to be a villain, That's what they became. They said, well, if that's what you want me to be, and I actually believe in that, that's what people will be. You know, we're all products of our environment. And anybody that you see coming off the path or going down a road that isn't a good one, they've been forced down that road. And people say, oh, you get to make choices. No, you don't. If you've got somebody telling you all your life, you're thick, you're stupid, you're dumb, you'll never amount to anything. All you're good for is to use your hands. You know, your people don't do this sort of work. Your people this, your people that. If you are bombarded with that, eventually you say, well, do you know what? I'll play to that stereotype, because I did. I got to 15, 16, and I played to it. I thought, you want to see a villain? I'll show you a villain. You know, but then I realized I wised up. I got a really good first job, a really good white boss, and I wised up. But you play to that, to what society says it wants to see.
Wow. So you mentioned that the ratio was for every 10 mean people, there was one good people.
Always one good one. Always one good one.
Wow.
And that's why, you know, that's what's kept me in the country so long, because there are some wonderful, beautiful English people. There really, really are. They're wonderful people. A lot of my success I owe to them. Talking to me, nurturing me, keeping me on the right path, stopping me from getting into trouble and ending up in jail. You know, I owe a lot to white people. And that's what gave me that balance, Payman. I have to acknowledge it. I had two superb teachers who helped me in primary school and in secondary school. My first boss was a good man, albeit I let him down, but he was a good man. And my university lecturer when I did my degree, the opportunities he afforded me. People saw in me that there was something in me. There was something special in me. That I had a bit of talent. That, you know, I was a good kid. People saw that, and some people rose to that. Other people saw it and wanted to kill it. You know, because as I said last week, you know, that expression I'll never forget. There's only one thing worse than an uneducated nigger, and that's an educated nigger, and I'll never forget that. So, which spurred me on to educate myself.
Wow. That is a sad state of affairs for sure. So when you were going to all of that, how were your parents, your family, were they preparing you and helping you cope with that by telling you, hey?
No, because they were suffering from the same narrative. They turned up here not expecting the treatment. They didn't expect to be treated the way they were. My mother came here as a qualified nurse and wasn't allowed to be a nurse because she qualified in the Caribbean. She then turned around and said, but the Caribbean qualification that I've got is the same as the English qualification. So why can't I be a nurse? It's the same qualification. No, you can't be a nurse because even though it's the same qualification, you got it in Jamaica, you didn't get it in England. That's the kind of bull, S-H-I-T, that my mother had to tolerate. Same qualification, same exam papers.
You know,
but
Trevor,
in Jamaica, they said, no, you've got to resit it in the UK, knowing full well my mother couldn't afford to resit it in the... So my mother became what many Caribbean nurses became in the 60s, yeah? They emptied bedpans, changed, you know, messy beds, and mopped and cleaned floors and worked in the kitchen. And that's what my mother did for 9 years, until she said enough is enough. And she went to America. When she divorced my father, she went to America where her qualification was accepted, and she spent the rest of her life as the nurse that she trained to be. That's what my mother suffered.
wow.
Now, my mother was reasonably educated. She came from a good family in the Caribbean. My father wasn't. My father was, you know, he was rough. And they were a marriage made in hell, because my mum was, you know, very attractive, Jamaican, Indian, Chinese. She was Indian Chinese, very attractive, very educated, well-to-do family. My dad was African Caribbean of African stock from what you call the Jamaican inner city. Rough. And it was a marriage made out of hell. It wasn't going to work. And then there was me, my brother and sister. We got caught up in all of this. And so my mother and father came here. They tried it. the amount of racism that they suffered, the racism my father suffered was unbelievable. You know, the manual work he had to do working for Cross and Blackwell. Then he went to work for Ford's, because a lot of Caribbeans in London ended up in the Ford's car factory.
Wow.
And my mother and father ended up splitting up. My mother ended up having to leave. I ended up growing up with my father and my brother and my sister. So, you know, my mother left us with my father. So they were not easy times. So my parents had to fight what I had to fight. So, you know, they came here thinking that the education system was great and it would accept us. It would just say, they had no idea of the racism. So when I got to 11 before my father actually said to me, I hear you. Wow. But before then, I couldn't go home at 7, 8 or 9 and tell my mum and dad I'd suffered racism. Yeah. Or why did you get into trouble at school today? Because a little white boy called me a monkey. You know, my mum and dad would say, well, no, you shouldn't let that upset you. You shouldn't let it get, you know, they believed in the system. And I think that first arrival of parents who came in the 60s spent 10 years believing in the system until they realized their children were getting messed with. They had faith. You know, it's in the Caribbean system. You send your child to school, you put the faith in the school teacher. They're going to get educated. And they came here with that same faith, not knowing they were putting us into schools where we were deliberately suffering institutional racism, systemic racism, structural racism, and just downright up in your face and on your case racism. And so it took them a while. It took them a while.
Wow. Did you suffer also racism and discrimination from your teachers, from professors, and not just your classmates?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, definitely from teachers,
wow.
Yes. When we came in, there were a group of teachers in this country who were racist. And, you know, the country was just coming out of World War II. There were no real people of color. The country had suffered during the war. And you had these sort of core elitist racists. And there was no way they wanted to educate me. There was no way they wanted to give me an equal playing field with the whites. It wasn't going to happen. And I would say 50% of the teachers that I experienced from the age of 11 to, because primary school, I think, I'm not going to count primary school, but I think secondary school, the informative years, from the age of 11 to the age of 16, I'd say 50% of my teachers were racist. And some were violently racist, you know. And back then in the UK, you had corporal punishment, so they could cane us, they could beat us. And yeah, I got caned a lot. Yeah.
Wow.
But disproportionately, I mean, black boys, yeah, we got caned a lot. Yeah.
That's so sad. So, you know, you mentioned that your mother couldn't get a schooling from Jamaica as a nurse recognized in the UK. To this day, it's the same thing in Canada. When I was in Canada, I've met so many pharmacists, doctors, pilots that were working at restaurants as a waiter, as a pizza delivery, or even as a cab driver, because the system wouldn't recognize their credentials, even though their credentials are actually much higher than the Canadian ones.
Absolutely.
But because it was not in Canada, you have to do it in Canada, which is absolutely BS.
Yeah.
So many people couldn't get to start all over again. And when you're 45, 50 years old, you have a career, you have an already established career back home. You don't have the time, you don't have the patience, in most cases, also you don't have the money to go to the grind again. It's so unfair.
Yes. That is the word. It is just so unjust. But that is the nature of being a new arrival into a foreign system, where that foreign system does not want you to assimilate to the degree where you have equal opportunity. So you can have an opportunity, but it's not going to be equal. We got some grass for you to cut. We got some floors for you to mop. We got some buses for you to drive. But over and above that, no. And I can just imagine in Canada exactly the same as the UK experience. You know, particularly I imagine in French Canada as well.
Yes, it could be. Yes, it could be. I did not experience it myself growing up, because when I went to school in Canada, it was in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. Things were much different.
So they're a bit more liberal. Yeah.
Yes. But still, and I still to this day, countless people that immigrate to Canada, and Canada is a well-known country of immigration. So they
Yeah,
find
absolutely.
themselves to be a country of immigration, but yet on the same edge, on the other side of the spectrum, they don't recognize their credentials because they want them to be Canadianized, just a money grab for them. There's no other ways
Absolutely.
around it.
Absolutely. Oh, Payman, you know the score, my friend. You know. So yes, that's what I suffered, initially. I got thrown out of school at the age of 15. I was excluded
Wow.
permanently. You're supposed to have two what they call temporary exclusions, and then after that you get excluded. I had 5 because they kept giving me another chance. They knew I had a brain. Very difficult disciplining me, because every time they disciplined me, it wasn't because I did something wrong. It was because I stood up for myself.
You challenge them, yes, and I don't like that.
Challenge them. I had people wanted to know, how come you've had 5 temporary exclusions? It's because the head teacher had to exclude me, but at the end of the day, couldn't throw me out permanently because he knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just standing up for myself. And that's what my dad put in me. And, I had to go home and tell my dad I stood up for myself. Because if I went home and told my dad I didn't stand up for myself, he'd give me the worst beating.
Oh, yes.
So I had to say, no, Dad, I stood up for myself. He said, well, good, son, because that's what he wanted me to do, because he learned that he had to stand up for himself. There was an incident when my dad was in a phone box. We had the red phone boxes. And we were at home and he didn't come home. And where we live just over the road from the police station, literally a stone's throw from the police station. And he didn't come home, and I went over to the police station and I said, well, my dad hasn't come home. It's about 10 o'clock and he only left to make a phone call. And they said, oh, he's in the cell. And do you want to see him? And they took me in the cell, and my dad was in the cell. And a white man had come to the phone box and had opened the door and said to my dad, nigger, you need to finish your call because I need to make a call, and these phone boxes are for white people. They're not for niggers like you. Anyway, my father just pushed him away and closed the door, continued with the call. This man opened the door, grabbed my father, threw him out of the phone box. Bad, very big mistake. My father beat the 7 coloured out, but got arrested, as you do. If you're black and you defend yourself, you're going to jail as well. And then the English will tell you about, oh, you shouldn't retaliate. And but he hit me first. Oh, it doesn't matter. And I grew up with that crap. Oh, it doesn't matter. But he hit me first. It doesn't matter. But he assaulted me first. But it doesn't matter.
Wow.
Oh, no, you're supposed to stand there, let them beat me up. And then when you come along, say, I want to press charges. And then you won't. So it was a fait accompli. You couldn't win. So my father got arrested. The man got arrested. Anyway, the police know exactly what happened when my father told them. They knew the racism. So they held my father. And then about 11 o'clock at night, they let him go. And he went back the following day. They didn't charge him.
Wow.
But that's the sort of, again, instances of the kind of racism that helped to harden my father, make him a very hard man. And he as well left the country. When I got to 15, he sold a house, rented a room, and said, I've paid a month's rent on this room. You're going to have to live in it because I'm selling a house. I'm going to America.
Wow.
So my mother had been there, had immigrated there when I was 9. He immigrated there when I was 15, because they just fed up of and they felt America would be a better place for them.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, it was. Actually, America was. They did do better in America, albeit America is, again, virulently, structurally, systemically, and institutionally racist.
So this racism was pretty much prevalent everywhere, whether it was on the classroom, outside, work,
and it was class-based as well.
in the kindergarten.
Yeah.
Sorry, not the
everywhere.
kindergarten, and the playground, the football pitch, everywhere.
Yeah. When we went to secondary school, the racism was from the teachers, because we didn't take the racism from the white kids. We wouldn't have it. So we learned to become strong. We learned to unite. We had a policy: no white kid's going to beat a black kid. So no white boy or no white boys are going to beat black boys. Because if that happened, 10 of us would just go and beat the white boy. Yeah, so we ruled school. We weren't having it from the white boys, but the teachers gave us hell.
Of course.
Yeah, we came together. We were not having that. No.
Was there a specific moment in your path that you felt that there's nothing you can do and you just accept it for what it is?
Yeah, you do, particularly when it came to the police.
All right.
What do you do? They stop you, they search you, they give you a bit of a slapping, they arrest you, then they throw you out the van. What do you do? What do you do?
Have you ever been racially profiled? Let's say you're driving a nice car, dressed nicely, they stop you.
God,
What do you do?
absolutely.
Are you a drug dealer, or where do you steal this?
Absolutely. Oh, lost count, Payman, lost count.
So
At
sad.
the age of 21, I bought a Datsun 260Z, beautiful sports car. And a police officer stopped me and charged me for stopping on a zebra crossing.
Seriously?
100%. And it was always the same. Your car? Yes, officer. Why do you ask if it's my car? Why would I be driving? Because that's me. I like to challenge. Yeah, the stupid questions. And I hate it. I hate the stupid questions. So, excuse me, sir, is this your car? Officer, why would I be driving somebody else's car? Oh, you're a bolshy one. No, I'm not a bolshy one, but why would I be driving? Yes, it's my car. And so we don't start off well, because you start with this, is this your car? But you don't stop white people and ask them if it's their car. Of course it's my car, I didn't borrow it, ain't my dad's car. So I was always that sort, and what they call cheeky and bolshy, because I just didn't like the BS.
What was the most frustrating?
What's the problem, officer? Oh, well, did you notice that just a while ago the traffic was falling and you stopped, your front two tires stopped on the zebra crossing? I said, well, actually, no, officer, I didn't notice. I said, well, you didn't, I'm going to charge you for it. Yeah. And I went to court, Tower Bridge magistrate, and Andy found me, and the magistrate found me guilty. And up until this day, I've never met anybody else in English society, up until this day, who's been charged with stopping on a zebra crossing. Payment, it's laughable, my friend. The stuff I went through, the racial profiling that I went through, is unbelievable. But it's amazing how times change, because they don't stop me now. I don't get stopped now, because I know what they do now is they have a system where they know black people. They know now. They'll look at my number plate and then it will actually be down as a black man owning the car. Then it won't stop me, because they do. They racially profile. I absolutely know they do. So, and now, it's the young Asian boys who are getting pulled up,
Really?
The young Muslim. Yeah. The cult devil changes.
The flavor of
before,
yeah.
Before black people turned up in the 60s, it was the Irish. And then they stopped doing it to the Irish and started to do it to us. Now they do it to the Eastern Europeans and the Muslim boys. You always got to have somebody to hate. Who's going to be next? The boat arrivals?
I was about to say that.
I call it the cult devil. They've always got to have somebody to hate. As I said in the previous, I remember seeing the signs: no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. The Irish took hell in the 40s and 50s before the blacks turned up.
Wow.
And then the blacks took hell for the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then after that, we got the Muslim terrorism, and now the Muslim boys take hell. Society's got to have somebody to kick.
Yeah, it's so sad. So sad. Maybe next will be the Chinese, or who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Got to have somebody to give a kick in. And that's the nature of systemic racism. Whose turn is it now? I get people saying to me, "Oh, Trev, how are you, mate? Oh, it's really good to see you. How you doing? How's your work? How's your job?" I tell you what, them Eastern Europeans. And I just look at them and think, that's what they used to say about me 40 years ago. Same thing. I've arrived.
Yeah.
You're all right, Trevor. It's them Eastern Europeans we've got a problem with. And I think, really? It's sad.
That is crazy. Yeah, wow.
But you know what, Payman? There's an old saying, and you're a man like me, you're a man of God. And if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
And I think racism is backfiring on them, because what it's producing are very, very strong, resilient people.
Yes.
Who educate themselves, who use every tool in the box to better themselves. So, I think it backfires on them. And that's what I've observed. I look at my children and how they've educated themselves. And I look around and I think, racism and sexism and, just any kind of bad behavior backfires on it, because it doesn't always de-skill, demoralize, and demotivate the person who's suffering it. Sometimes it actually empowers.
Wow.
And I'm a product of that. I maybe wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't suffered all the racism and was determined to rise above it, educate myself, and prove them all wrong, which I've done. So I've got nothing to prove. I don't need to validate myself.
Yeah. What is the status of, I don't know if status is the right term, but the how prevalent is racism today and the English society, especially versus, say, Black people?
Yeah, we've got intra-racism. We've always had it. There's the light-skinned Black, the dark-skinned Black. We call it colorism. We're now beginning to address it. We know that the light-skinned Blacks, the dual heritage, they get a better deal than the dark-skinned Blacks. We're seeing what's going on in this country where mixed race people are just going through. And I will use the term mixed race. I'm not shy to use it. And some say are getting a better deal than people of my color or dark. So there is that. There's the excuse me, Payman. I tell a lot of people, Black people, we're not homogenous. We're not homogenous. People from the Caribbean and people from Africa, we're not homogenous.
Oh, no.
We have our different cultures and our different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Our different languages, our different, and I think, but that's part of the problem with racism. They just lump us all together.
Mm-hmm.
Make these mass assumptions about, without realizing that there are people of my color from an awful lot of places around the world, and we don't necessarily always have stuff in common. And I think that's just the ignorance in the way that the Germans and the Italians and the Spanish and the French are all white, but they all have different cultures, different languages, and different ways of doing. I think sometimes they homogenize and throw all of us into one barrel and just have this blanket stereotype of Black.
Seal it and forget it. Yes, absolutely. Wow. That's crazy. So at what point, do you remember if there was a specific point in time that you noticed that maybe the tide is turning in the right direction as far as racism is concerned in the UK society?
Yeah. After George Floyd, that for me was the biggest sea change I've ever seen. My phone rang off the hook. Thousands of companies, everybody wanted to make a statement or do something different or do some training. But what I've seen since then is a complete reversal. I had a couple of 100 companies call me, about 30 called me back. It was just a knee-jerk reaction to George Floyd and what happened. But I did see it for the first time in my life. I saw people marching in every country in the world about racism. Countries that I never dreamed I'd see, Australia, countries I'd never dream of ever seeing, countries where there were no Black people, white people were out on the streets marching. And I felt then that we were on the cusp of some genuine change. No.
Indeed. Wow.
We've just gone right back to where we were, and it's even worse now. It's as if we've had this Trump-esque neoliberal backlash towards that, and now we're having, when I look at the world now and I see racists asserting themselves everywhere, the far right are doing well everywhere. In France, in Spain, in Italy, they're now emerging in the UK. Trump, the far right are just emerging, and it's fear. It's just fear. And I know why it is. It's just fear.
Why do you think that is? We see a resurgence of nationalistic viewpoints among people, especially in the Western Europe?
Well, if the truth be known, most people don't know that the white population are about 15% of the planet. Yeah, and I teach that, and a lot of people are shocked. I ask white people, what percentage of the world is white? 20%, 30%, 40%, 15% of the world is white. That means 85% of the world is not white. Yet the 15% control 85% of the world's resources. Yes? They're
Yes.
also a shrinking population. They're not growing. The white population is not growing. And white people in the know, they know that. So if their population isn't growing, they're panicking. What are we going to do? Because Africa's growing, the non-white population in the world is growing, we're not growing. And this has led to this panic that they're now going through. Because if I know the data, Trump knows the data, Le Pen knows the data, they all know the data. You see, where capitalism forces you to have 1.2 children, what capitalism doesn't tell you is that after 60 years, your population is going to start declining. And they've realized that. So, you know, what are they now doing? What are they going to do about it? And they want to panic and they're scared. They're scared that they're going to become a very small minority and lose their power and lose their privilege. Yeah, their white privilege. They're scared of losing that. And that's why Trump wants to make America great again. He wants to go back to the day, yes, when even if you were a poor white American, you were better than a rich black American. You know, cognitive dissonance and the nature of white supremacy. And their fear is they will no longer control. And that's what's going on. And I think there's this emerging backlash where white people are beginning to feel out. We're a minority and we're not growing. And, you know, what are we going to do?
Indeed. Wow, that is really a unique situation
It's
to
all
be.
data. You can go on the WHO website. Anybody who watches this podcast, go on the WHO website, look at population projections. Yeah, for the next century. Yes, there'll be 11.25 billion people in the world at the end of this century, of which 7.4 billion will be African. You can't stop it. Because the only countries in the world where women are still having 4 or 5 children is Africa. And unless you're going to have 3, 4 children per family, you're not going to grow. You're going to have an emerging old class and a very small working class, very small young, and that's what's happening all over white Europe. But it's not happening in Africa. In Africa, you've got a big young populations that can then go into the economy and run the economy and provide for the older people. So you don't end up having a crisis in social care because you've got too many old people, not enough young people. And that's what's going to happen. So, you know, they're inverted economics that says, no, we only don't have too many children. Not a good call. I can't hear you, Penny, lost the sound.
Wow, that is crazy. So why do you think that the whites of the world all of a sudden are no longer having children? Same thing in Japan. Japan is facing a major population crisis.
China's facing it.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, because capitalism tells you not to have too many kids so that you can earn lots of money and drive big cars and live in big houses. It's capitalism. Capitalism has encouraged white people not to have a lot of children. It's frowned on it. You know, at the turn of the century, white people, the average family size was 4 or 5 kids. Yeah? And then we went into World War II, we came out of that, and it wasn't trendy. You know, what was it? You had to have like 2.4, you know, you have to have 2.4 children in order for your society to, and capitalism just said, no, don't have a lot of kids, you have 1 kid, or at the most you have 2, or child. I shouldn't use the term kid, it's horrible. And that's what's done it. It's this pursuit of material wealth. Why do I have 4 kids and be poor all my life, looking after 4 or 5 kids? You know, and we've forgotten what this world is about. You're created to create.
Absolutely.
You're not created to amass greed and to amass wealth for yourself. You're created to create. My mother and father had 5. I've got 3. Create.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a responsibility. You've got to look after those children in the way that you were looked after. But you don't say, I'm only going to have 1 kid because I want to drive a big flash car and live in a big flash house.
At what point would you think that those populations, especially the whites or the Chinese or the Japanese, will realize, hey, they gotta.
They've realized. They've realized. They have realized.
They have to do something, otherwise
Look
it's
at what
a
the
ticking
Chinese
bomb.
are doing. The Chinese are encouraging people. There was a time when the Chinese were killing babies. They're now encouraging it because they know in 2030 their population is going to reach 0-0. They know that these policies have failed, and they're now trying to reverse it. You know, in the UK, I believe they're also injecting black people into their gene pool. That's what they're doing. This is why the fastest growing population in the UK is mixed race. Mixed race.
Same thing in Canada, same thing in the US. Yes.
Yeah, fastest growing population. And that injection into the gene pool will hopefully mean their survival going forward. That's the truth of the matter. And they don't want to hear it, Payman, and this is why I wanted to talk to you about it, because people need to hear it.
Oh,
Mixed race is the new white.
It's a very powerful topic, and I'm glad that we shared about it, because this is affecting us, unfortunately, more and more nowadays than even before. It doesn't change. It just evolved into a different form.
Completely, absolutely.
More sneaky, more naughty way. You know?
More covert. It's not above the table now. It's all under the table. It's devious. It's very covert. You know, and people say, well, Trevor, don't you think racism has gone on? No, it's just changed.
Yeah, it's evolved.
People don't come up to my face anymore and call me a nigger, Payman. But they still think I'm a nigger.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, it's just gone under the table. You know, whereas before they tell you to your face you can't have the job. Now they interview you and say, oh, we're so sorry. Nothing's changed. What's changed is how they do it.
It's a soft type of discrimination now. It's a soft type of softer and even meaner in a way, because, hey, you have no idea what's going on, and yet they still do. Before they would just call it to your face so you knew exactly what was going on.
Exactly where you stood. Now, God, I dread for this generation. I mean, I'm constantly having to tell them, you're going to suffer racism. No. There's a whole generation of dual heritage, mixed race, and black kids who actually think the system's going to treat them great. And I have to break their bubble and say, you know, you need to toughen up now, because it isn't. You're going to suffer some racism. You know, well, I didn't suffer it at school. I've got lots of white friends, and I'm you know, I'm in a multiracial. Yeah, you're going to suffer it. So get ready for it.
Wow. Well, we got to be ready, and we got to adapt, because everything moves. Nothing stays the same.
Adapt and change. Resilience.
Absolutely.
If you can't cure something, what you can do is become resilient to it.
Honestly, we have no choice. You have to, for your own sake, for survival.
Your own survival. Absolutely. And that's what I've done. I'm resilient. I'd like to think that racism has diminished a little bit over the period of my life, but gone away? Absolutely not. But what it has done, what I have developed, and what I put into my daughters, black women, is resilience. So I tell my daughters, I can't take the shit away, but I can equip you to deal with it. Excuse my language. And that's what I do. In the program that I run at the moment, the management and leadership program that I run, it's about saying to potential black managers and leaders, I can't take away the institutional structure and systemic racism that you're going to suffer as you're trying to navigate management and leadership. What I can do is make you resilient so that you can cope with it and deal with it, and it doesn't destroy you.
Absolutely.
So the key for me is resilience.
That's a powerful way to summarize things, because nowadays being resilient is a matter of survival, literally.
Yes. If you're not resilient, you'll crack. You know,
you'll be chewed. You'll be chewed alive.
That's right. You know, my daughter's going through a terrible situation in her workplace at the moment with racism, and promised a promotion, and then the woman took it back, gave the job to her best friend who isn't qualified. And my daughter is standing up for herself, very resilient, and she's going through hell, but she will survive.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a powerful conversation. I'm glad we had it. And let's call it a day for today, and then we can schedule up one for a week or two to talk about something else. And
so long as you want to hear more from me, I'll make myself available for you.
Absolutely, and I'm delighted for that. So listen, my friend, if someone wants to connect with you, very welcome. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Best way to do it, so it's www.Gordon French with one F Associates, all one word, GordonFrenchAssociates.com. And they'll be able to find my website. And I don't really want to put my number out on this, but that's probably the best way to get hold of me. And Payman, I just want to say I've been nominated for a national award, Black Talent Award, in the senior leader category. I'm over the moon. I don't want an OBE or an MBE. I don't want any of those awards that the British want to give with the word empire in it. If it's got the word empire in it, I don't want it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, no, because so many black people take them and then they bang on about racism and they bang on about, but they use them, don't they? They get the OBE and they use it. And then they're the first ones. So there's a lot of people who aren't going to like what I've got to say, but I don't want an OBE or an MBE because they buy you, you know, they buy you, and I won't be bought. But to be awarded by my peers for my contributions as a black leader, that for me is really touching. So I'll let you know if I win. I've got through the shortlisting. I'm one of the finalists. I'll be going to the big event in October. I've got the interview in July. I'll let you know if I win. But just to be nominated and to get this far is an honor. So
that's amazing. I'm not gonna say good luck. You don't need it. I'm gonna only say congratulations in advance because I know you will get it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You are, you know, you worked. It's not a matter of luck. You've worked all your life to get there, to become the person that you needed to be, to learn all the skills, the knowledge, the wisdom for you to be now an impactful leader. So now that you're in, there's no luck involved, my friend. It's just a matter of timing. So it's yours. It's yours for the taking. And you will, by the grace of the Almighty, you have it. It has your name on it. And it will come find you. So that you can amplify further your impact, inspire others, and plant the seed in the minds of others who might feel that they have no voice, that they don't matter, they have no option, that, hey, do matter. Look at me. I'm speaking generally, not of me, but generally speaking, if I made it, despite all the challenges, there's no reason that you cannot make it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I've got this saying, we make it in spite of, Padman, not because of.
And nothing happens to you, but for you.
For you. Absolutely.
Just like you said earlier, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you strong. And God never gives us anything we can't handle.
Can't bear. Oh, absolutely, my friend. And on that note, may God bless you. May He keep you in His perfect
Thank you.
peace.
You too, my brother.
May He give you a wonderful week ahead. And I look forward to our next session, which will probably, I unfortunately, you know, probably the week after next.
Absolutely.
I've got some training to do next.
Absolutely. In the meantime, keep shining your light, keep blessing the world with everything you've got.
Thank you, sir.
See you soon.
God bless you, Payman.
Thank you. You too, my friend. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.